Have you ever wondered why the more you think about a problem, the more confused and exhausted you feel? Why is it that even with all our intelligence and endless reflection, peace often feels further away, not closer? Have you noticed how one small thought can spiral into hours of anxiety? How a single worry can take over your entire day without you even realizing it? Why does the mind, which is supposed to help us, so often become the very thing that traps us? Welcome to Stillness Unfolded, a space where ancient Buddhist wisdom meets the challenges of the modern mind. I'm so grateful to have you here. Today, we're diving deep into a question that touches every one of us: why overthinking never solves anything, and how it quietly erodes our happiness. Together, we'll uncover why the mind overthinks, why trying to silence it backfires, and most importantly, how to find real freedom, not by battling the mind, but by understanding it. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by your own thoughts, if you've ever wished for more clarity, more peace, more presence, then this journey is for you. So, before we begin, please take a moment to give this video a like if you find value here, and consider subscribing to Stillness Unfolded so we can continue unfolding calmness and clarity together. Your support means the world and helps this channel bring more mindful, soul-nourishing content to you and others. And don't forget, this video is packed with insights that build on each other step by step. Stay with me until the end to fully grasp the teachings and see the path to freedom with new eyes. Let's take a breath and step into a deeper understanding of the mind. Chapter 1: The Nature of Thought and How It Becomes a Prison. Thinking, in itself, isn't the enemy. Our ability to reflect, remember, and imagine is part of what makes us human. Planning for the future, evaluating the past, these are natural tools of survival. But like any tool, when misused or overused, they can cause harm. In Buddhism, thoughts are seen as mental formations, or sankhara in Pali. These are not static or permanent. They arise, they pass. Just like waves on the surface of a lake, they're in constant motion. But what creates suffering is not the wave. It's our habit of clinging to it. We don't just notice thoughts. We believe them. We chase them. We build entire emotional realities around them. Imagine this. You make a small mistake in conversation. The moment passes, but your mind holds on. It replays the words. It edits the scene. It adds emotional effects like embarrassment, guilt, or shame. A single moment becomes a mental echo chamber that can last for hours or days. From a Buddhist view, this is not presence, it's attachment. The problem isn't the thought, it's the identification with the thought. When we think, "I am my thoughts," we become prisoners of them. We mistake temporary mental events for lasting truths. In psychology, overthinking is sometimes framed as rumination or cognitive looping. But from a Dharma perspective, it's a symptom of not seeing thoughts as empty phenomena. When we attach, we suffer. When we observe, we're free. The mind's habit of manufacturing stories is ancient. It evolved to predict danger, to prepare for the unexpected. But today, most of the dangers we fear are not lions lurking in the tall grass. They are fears born inside our heads: social judgment, career failure, rejection. And yet, the mind responds to these imagined threats with the same urgency, as if our survival depended on it. It spins scenarios. It strategizes defenses. It replays conversations as though rehearsing for battles that may never come. In doing so, the mind forgets that most of its fears are shadows, not real threats. The thought of embarrassment feels as heavy as real harm. The worry about an uncertain future weighs as much as a true catastrophe. And the more we believe the mind's projections, the tighter the prison becomes. It's not the existence of thoughts that creates bondage. It's our unquestioned loyalty to them. Without mindfulness, we don't see thoughts arise and pass. Instead, we pick them up like heavy stones and carry them around, mistaking them for parts of ourselves. In Buddhist teaching, this clinging is at the heart of dukkha, the pervasive unsatisfactoriness of existence. When we identify with the contents of our mind, we anchor ourselves to impermanence. Thoughts shift, emotions fluctuate, perceptions change, and if our sense of self is entangled with them, we are dragged helplessly through every wave of experience. Picture a person standing on the shore, desperately trying to stop the waves with their hands. It's a losing battle. No matter how hard they try, the sea keeps moving. Thoughts are the same. They are part of the natural landscape of consciousness. Fighting them, fearing them, or clinging to them only strengthens their grip on us. Freedom doesn't come from eliminating thoughts. It comes from changing our relationship to them. Instead of grabbing onto every thought and inflating it into a truth, we learn to let it pass like a bird flying across a vast sky. We witness the arising and ceasing without constructing a story in between. Awareness, then, is the key. When we observe thoughts without identification, they lose their power to define us. They appear, they dissolve. Some thoughts are pleasant, some are painful, but none have the authority to dictate who we are unless we grant them that power. In this way, mindfulness is not about suppressing thinking. It's about depersonalizing it. It's about remembering, this is just a thought, not a command, not a verdict, not my identity. As we deepen this insight, we begin to experience a subtle but profound freedom, the freedom of not being at the mercy of every story the mind spins. And in that freedom, the mind itself starts to quiet, not through force, but through wisdom. Chapter 2. Thoughts don't ask permission, they just appear. Have you ever noticed how thoughts seem to spring into your mind without warning? You might be tying your shoes, washing your hands, or standing in line at a cafe, and suddenly, a memory surfaces, a worry sneaks in, a plan unfolds. You didn't invite these thoughts. They simply appeared, like gusts of wind passing through an open window. This spontaneous arising of thought is one of the most misunderstood aspects of human consciousness. We often assume that because a thought occurs, we must have intended it, that its mere presence somehow makes it important, or worse, true. But Buddhism offers a radically different perspective. Thoughts are natural phenomena, like clouds drifting through the sky or leaves floating down a river. The mind generates thoughts just as the body breathes or the heart beats. It's automatic, it's continuous, and it's not personal. The Buddha taught that mental formations, including thoughts, are conditioned. They arise based on causes and conditions, past experiences, sensory stimuli, emotional states. You might see someone who reminds you of a childhood friend, and suddenly memories you hadn't thought about in years surface unbidden. You didn't summon them. They simply appeared, conditioned by circumstance. Understanding this can profoundly change your relationship with your mind. Instead of asking, "Why did I think that?" or blaming yourself for the content of your thoughts, you begin to realize, thinking is happening. That's all. It's not a sign of moral failure or weakness. It's not a verdict on who you are. It's simply the mind doing what minds do. However, the real trap is not in the thoughts arising. It's in what happens next. When a thought appears, most people unconsciously accept it as meaningful. We weave it into a story. We attach emotions to it. We act based on it. A single thought, left unexamined, can spiral into hours of anxiety, resentment, fantasy, or regret. Imagine sending a text message to a friend and not receiving an immediate reply. That's the situation, neutral, uncharged. But the mind doesn't leave it at that. Instead, it begins crafting a narrative. Did I say something wrong? Are they upset with me? Maybe they don't care anymore. Before you even realize it, you feel hurt, rejected, insecure, all based on a mental movie that never had a foundation in reality. This is what the Buddha meant when he said suffering arises not from reality itself, but from our proliferation of mental stories, papanka. We don't experience life directly. We experience the commentary the mind provides, and we rarely question whether that commentary is accurate. Without mindfulness, we live as though every thought were a messenger carrying ultimate truth. We let them color our emotions, dictate our actions, and shape our relationships. But the truth is, most thoughts are just noise, random bursts of memory, prediction, judgment, and fantasy. They are like background static on a radio, meaningless unless we tune into them and make them our focus. Learning to see this changes everything. Instead of reacting automatically to every thought, we cultivate a stance of gentle observation. A thought arises, there it is. A story forms, there it goes. Like clouds moving across the sky, thoughts don't require our involvement to appear or to pass away. This doesn't mean we suppress thinking or try to block thoughts from arising. Suppression only adds another layer of struggle. Instead, we meet thoughts with curiosity. What is this? We watch them arise, persist for a moment, and then dissolve, without clinging, without judgment. In this way, a space opens inside us. A space where we are no longer puppeteered by every idea that flickers across the mind. A space where freedom breathes. Over time, you may notice that most thoughts don't need to be acted upon. They don't even need to be believed. Some thoughts are helpful, practical. Others are absurd, repetitive, or driven by old fears. Through mindfulness, you learn to discern the difference, not through resistance, but through wisdom. The mind, like a restless monkey, will keep tossing thoughts into the arena of awareness. But you are not obligated to chase every banana it throws. True freedom begins when you recognize, thoughts are happening, but I don't have to follow. And in that simple realization, a profound shift begins. The shift from being lost in the mind's endless chatter to resting in the spaciousness that simply witnesses it all. Chapter 3. Why thinking feels useful, but isn't true wisdom. In the modern world, thinking is often elevated to the highest pedestal. Intelligence is measured by how quickly and sharply one can process information. Success is credited to those who can outthink and outplan the competition. From classrooms to boardrooms, thinking is prized as the ultimate tool. But from the perspective of Buddhist insight, there is a subtle trap hidden in this glorification, mistaking endless thought for genuine wisdom. It's understandable why we fall into this illusion. Thinking appears helpful. After all, it allows us to solve problems, plan meals, navigate cities, and invent technologies. When faced with uncertainty, the mind promises that if we just think a little harder, turn the problem over a few more times, we'll find clarity and peace. Yet experience tells a different story. How many times have you thought yourself into exhaustion without finding real answers? How often has analyzing a situation endlessly only led to deeper confusion, anxiety, or paralysis? The mind, like a machine, can generate infinite scenarios, endless possibilities, countless interpretations, but none of that guarantees wisdom. In Buddhist teachings, wisdom, panna, is not born from the accumulation of thoughts. It arises from seeing reality directly, beyond the filters of conceptualization. The Buddha compared the mind to a stirred-up pond. When the waters are agitated, you cannot see the bottom. You cannot perceive the truth of what lies beneath. Only when the water becomes still does the reflection become clear. In the same way, when the mind is caught in restless analysis, true understanding remains hidden. The more you stir the pond with thought, the murkier it becomes. It's not that thinking is bad. Thoughts are useful tools. They help structure daily life. They allow us to engage with the world. But they are limited instruments. They operate within the framework of memory, conditioning, and imagination. They cannot penetrate into the nature of reality itself. They can describe a tree. They can name its parts. But they cannot make you feel the coolness of its shade or smell its living scent. True wisdom arises when the mind becomes still enough to experience reality directly, without the mediation of constant commentary. Imagine washing dishes. If your mind is absorbed in planning tomorrow's meetings, worrying about finances, or replaying an argument, you're not truly present. You're lost in mental noise. The act of washing, the sensation of water, the texture of the plate, the rhythm of your breath, becomes invisible beneath the fog of thought. In contrast, if you are fully present with the simple act of washing, something extraordinary happens. A clarity emerges. You don't have to think about being alive, you feel it directly. You don't have to analyze peace, you inhabit it. This is the nature of insight in Buddhist practice. It's not a clever thought. It's not a mental achievement. It's a felt realization that arises when thought subsides and awareness deepens. Most people, unaware of this distinction, keep trying to think their way to peace. They chase after more information, more opinions, more strategies, hoping that somewhere, hidden in the labyrinth of thoughts, they will find rest. But peace is not hidden inside thought. It's hidden beneath it. Wisdom does not grow through accumulation. It grows through subtraction, through letting go of the unnecessary, through recognizing that more thinking often leads not to clarity, but to complexity. When you begin to see thought as a tool rather than a master, you can use it skillfully without becoming enslaved by it. You can plan your day, write your reports, solve your problems, and then you can put the tool down and simply be. Without the compulsive need to think about every moment, you actually experience the moment. This is the heart of mindfulness. not an escape from thought, but a relationship to thought rooted in awareness. A way of being where thinking serves life rather than consuming it. When the mind grows quiet, when presence deepens, you realize something profound. Wisdom was never far away. It was only obscured by the noise of endless thinking. And in that silence, in that stillness, you touch the peace that no amount of analysis could ever manufacture. Chapter 4. Why trying to stop thinking makes it worse. Once people recognize the exhaustion that comes from overthinking, it's natural to want an immediate solution. The mind, trained to fix problems, approaches this new challenge the same way it would repair a broken appliance or resolve a work issue. I need to stop thinking. And so begins a quiet war within. You sit down to meditate. You vow to clear your mind. You grit your teeth and command the thoughts to vanish. But instead of silence, what you encounter is even more noise. Thoughts multiply. They scatter and buzz like flies you cannot swat away. The more you try to suppress them, the louder they seem to get. This frustration leads many to believe they are bad at mindfulness, or that peace is impossible for them. But the truth is simple. Trying to force the mind into silence is itself another form of agitation. The Buddha never taught us to stop thinking by brute force. He taught us to see the nature of thought clearly, to see how it arises, how it passes, and how suffering begins not from the presence of thought, but from our clinging to it. Imagine a muddy river. If you stir it with a stick, hoping to make the mud settle faster, you only churn it up more. But if you simply leave the river alone, with patience, the mud will naturally sink to the bottom, and the water will clear. The mind is the same. When you allow thoughts to arise and pass without interference, they lose their momentum. They come, they linger briefly, and they move on. The mind settles not because you forced it, but because you stopped feeding it with resistance. In Buddhist teaching, this is the practice of non-grasping awareness. You observe what comes without grabbing it, without pushing it away, without identifying with it. You develop a quality of mind that is like the open sky, vast, spacious, untouched by the passing clouds. This doesn't mean you become passive or indifferent. It means you engage with life from a deeper center, a place that isn't constantly trying to fix or control the mind, but one that simply sees. Paradoxically, it is in this letting go that the mind naturally quiets. Like a wound that heals better when you stop picking at it, the mind returns to stillness when you stop battling with its movements. Another reason why trying to forcibly stop thinking fails is because such an effort is itself a form of thinking. I need to stop. I must silence my mind. Why am I still thinking? I'm failing. These are all just more thoughts, cleverly disguised as self-improvement. The mind, once again, traps you within itself. Freedom doesn't come through aggression. It comes through understanding. When a thought arises, simply notice it. Like watching a leaf float past on a stream. No need to jump in. No need to catch it or tear it apart. Just see it drift by. Sometimes it helps to label it gently. Planning, remembering, worrying. Not to judge it, but to recognize its nature. By labeling it, you create a tiny gap, a space where awareness can breathe. Over time, these small acts of noticing build a powerful momentum. You stop being dragged helplessly through the maze of your mind. You stand on the bank of the river, watching the current flow, unattached, at peace. You begin to realize, you don't need to control the river. You only need to step out of it. When you no longer fight with thoughts, they lose their power to ensnare you. They become background noise rather than front stage performances. And slowly, without force, the deep silence that was always underneath the noise begins to reveal itself. It was never a question of stopping thought. It was a question of stopping the struggle. In this way, meditation is not a battle. It is a softening, an allowing, a return. Each time you catch yourself trying to silence the mind by effort, you can smile gently. Another thought, another wave, another chance to return to simple presence. The real peace you seek isn't on the other side of thought. It's right here, beneath it, quietly waiting for you to notice. Chapter 5. The silent power of returning to presence. In a world that constantly pulls us into distraction, presence feels almost unnatural. The mind, conditioned to wander, to plan, to worry, resists the simplicity of now. And yet, it is precisely in this humble returning to presence that true freedom begins. Presence is not a mystical state reserved for monks and sages. It's not about achieving a perfect stillness where no thought arises. Presence is simply the art of coming back, again and again, to the living reality of this moment. The Buddha described mindfulness, sati, as a thread that ties the mind to the body, anchoring awareness to the here and now. Without this thread, we drift endlessly in the sea of thoughts, fantasies, and regrets. With it, we find our footing on the solid ground of reality. You don't need a quiet forest or a sacred temple to practice presence. You can return to presence while washing your hands, hearing the rush of water and feeling its coolness. You can return while walking, noticing the touch of your feet on the earth. You can return while breathing, feeling the chest rise and fall like gentle waves. Each moment of returning is a moment of awakening. It's important to understand, presence isn't about perfection. Your mind will wander. It's what minds do. The practice is not to force it into stillness, but to notice when it drifts, and to return without judgment. This is the silent power of presence. It welcomes you back every time, without criticism, without shame. Most people misunderstand mindfulness as a tense effort to stay concentrated. They imagine presence means clutching the now so tightly that no thought can escape. But real presence is much softer. It's a receptive awareness, an openness to what is happening without resistance or grasping. Imagine holding a butterfly on your palm. If you grip it tightly, you harm it. If you open your hand and simply let it rest, it remains unharmed, free. Presence is like the open hand, allowing life to land, to stay or to leave, without forcing, without clinging. In this state, overthinking naturally diminishes, not because you fought it off, but because you no longer feed it with attention. Thoughts, especially those that breed anxiety or fear, require time to survive. They need a future to worry about, or a past to regret. They cannot root themselves in the timelessness of now. When you fully inhabit the present, thought loses its fuel. It becomes like a flame deprived of oxygen, flickering, then fading away. This is why mindfulness practice is so transformative. It doesn't eliminate life's challenges, but it transforms our relationship to them. A problem may still exist. A fear may still arise. But when you are rooted in presence, you are not overwhelmed. You see the fear, the worry, the tension as passing visitors, not permanent residents. And you remain the host, calm, spacious, free. It's not about denying emotions or rejecting thought. It's about seeing them clearly without drowning in them. It's about knowing, this is a thought, this is a feeling. They are here now, and they will pass. Presence gives you this perspective. It lifts you above the storm without needing to escape the sky. You can feel sadness without becoming sadness. You can notice anger without becoming consumed by anger. You can encounter fear without losing your center. And the beauty of presence is that it is always one breath away. Right now, as you read these words, you can feel the weight of your body on the chair. You can notice the flow of your breath. You can hear the subtle sounds around you. You don't have to change anything. You only have to notice. This humble act of noticing, the gentle return again and again, is the foundation of true spiritual freedom. You don't arrive at presence by running faster or trying harder. You arrive by stopping, by listening, by opening. Each time you return, even if only for a second, you weaken the grip of overthinking. You strengthen the muscle of awareness. You make it easier, next time, to come back. Presence isn't a distant goal. It's a living invitation, offered right here, right now. The question is simply, will you return? Chapter 6. Turning awareness into everyday freedom. The great promise of Buddhist teaching is that liberation is not reserved for a select few. You don't have to climb mountains, renounce the world, or master complex rituals. Freedom is woven into the fabric of daily life, accessible to anyone willing to open their eyes and truly see. Awareness is the key, but awareness is not something you only practice on a meditation cushion or inside a temple. It is a living presence that can infuse every moment of your day, no matter how ordinary. Turning awareness into everyday freedom means realizing that each situation, each encounter, each feeling is a doorway, an opportunity to wake up. You could be caught in traffic, frustration bubbling inside. Instead of letting the mind spin endless complaints, you pause. You notice the tightness in your chest. You feel the steering wheel beneath your hands. You hear the hum of engines around you. In that noticing, you step out of the mental narrative and back into the living world. Freedom is not found by controlling traffic. It's found by remembering yourself within it. You could be washing dishes, feeling bored or restless. The mind, seeking entertainment, tries to escape, planning tomorrow's schedule, replaying a conversation. But if you bring attention back to the warm water, the texture of soap, the rhythm of your breath, you discover that even in the smallest act, presence transforms experience. The act remains the same, but your relationship to it changes entirely. This is the heart of Buddhist mindfulness. Not changing life, but changing the lens through which you meet life. Most people live reacting to every thought, every mood, every sensation. A slight discomfort triggers a cascade of worries. A passing annoyance snowballs into anger. A fleeting desire hijacks hours of attention. They are puppets pulled by the invisible strings of unconscious patterns. But awareness cuts those strings. When you are aware, a thought is just a thought. A feeling is just a feeling. You don't have to obey every mental command. You don't have to follow every emotional impulse. You can notice without being possessed. You can feel without being defined. This doesn't mean you become numb or indifferent. In fact, presence heightens your sensitivity to life. You hear more. You see more. You feel more. But you are no longer drowning. You are floating, awake, and at ease. Turning awareness into everyday freedom requires patience. It's easy to remember in quiet moments, harder when life becomes noisy, stressful, unpredictable. But that is the real practice. Not being present only when conditions are perfect, but learning to return even amidst the chaos. Every moment of forgetting is simply another invitation to return. No need for guilt. No need for frustration. Just a gentle acknowledgement. I was lost. Now I am back. Each return strengthens your inner stability. Each act of noticing builds resilience. Over time, you find that even in the middle of conflict, loss, or uncertainty, there remains within you an untouched space, vast, clear, and free. This is the fruit of everyday awareness. It's not about living a problem-free life. Challenges will come, losses will happen, emotions will rise and fall. But amidst it all, you know who you are. The silent witness, the spacious awareness, the sky that holds every passing cloud without being disturbed. The Buddhist teaching points to this truth. You are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your circumstances. You are the awareness in which all these experiences appear and dissolve. And every time you remember this, not as an idea, but as a living experience, you reclaim your freedom. You realize you were never truly trapped by overthinking, by fear, by anger. You were only lost in a story the mind was telling. Awareness doesn't need to fight the story. It simply sees through it. And seeing through it, you step out, not into some distant paradise, but into the simple, sacred presence of now. You discover that liberation was never elsewhere. It was hidden in the most ordinary moments. The dishwashing, the walking, the breathing, the loving, the grieving. Freedom isn't a destination. It's a way of being. It's the art of living fully awake in the life you already have. If there's one thing to take away from today, it's this. You are not your thoughts. You are the vast, quiet space in which thoughts appear and dissolve. Overthinking doesn't end by force. It ends by recognition. It ends the moment you realize you don't have to follow every thought the mind presents. You can watch it rise, and you can let it pass. Like clouds in a wide, open sky, they do not define you. Freedom is not waiting for you somewhere far away. It's already here, hidden in the pauses between thoughts, in the soft awareness that has been with you all along. I hope today's journey gave you new eyes to see yourself and your mind, with more kindness, more clarity, and more trust in your natural stillness. If this teaching resonated with you, please give this video a like to let YouTube know this content matters, and subscribe to Stillness Unfolded if you haven't already. And if you feel called, share your thoughts, experiences, or even your questions in the comments below. I love reading your reflections, and your voice helps this community grow into a true sanctuary of mindful living. Remember, every moment you choose awareness over automatic thinking, you are stepping closer to your true freedom. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing presence. Until next time, keep returning to the stillness that has always been yours.